Good evening, everybody. We are ready for our last episode, well, potentially last episode of Hellblade 2, or sorry, I think the full title is Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2. I've been looking forward to this. I will confess that I haven't, I'm bad at remembering the controls, so I may stumble around a little bit at the start, but I don't think that's going to get in the way of us having a good time. I will also caution, and I'll probably mention this a couple of times during the stream too. So the last time we played this, there were problems with the kind of loading. I'm assuming this is like loading textures or something, or is it textures, shaders, whatever? Anyways, the tech. So we definitely had a bit of trouble even in the last stream where we did this. This would be last Wednesday. But it was considerably better than the first time that I did. And there is an advantage to me doing this on stream. So we may have to take the breaks in between. They did actually give me an opportunity to, get some of the conversation out, which was good. Oh, actually, I should have telegraphed the start a little bit earlier. Anyways, that's fine. I'm sure it will take a little while to get going, but it didn't. I would have preferred if it just was smooth sailing throughout, but as a second best, I'm not completely sold that it was unworkable on Wednesday. So we'll do our best with the current setup. And I don't know if it does turn out. I suppose I'd put it to you this way: if we seem to be close to the end, and so if we just don't make a whole lot of progress, obviously I'll sort of crack and go to the console. But that does carry with it its another set of penalties for myself. It's actually, I will say just before we jump in, I want to take a little bit of time to give people a chance to come into the stream, because it occurred to me that I did commit to saying that I'd be going live prior to actually starting the stream, and then I failed to do so. But I figured what I could do is I figured I could talk a little bit about a thing that happened to me over the last couple of days. So I got in touch with a kind of a middle school friend, which I don't think we ever really... I'm sorry, it'd probably be a lie to say that we didn't fall out of touch. We've never really been like in regular contact, but they're always somebody who I've been really happy to hear from whenever it comes up. And it seems like they were kind of going through a bit of a tough time, so I'm not entirely sure. This is always a tough one for me, because I want to be as helpful as I can, particularly to people like that who I think highly of, even if they're not necessarily someone who you'd sort of have this very overt display of caring a lot for. And I don't know, it's a weird one to explain. For me, this has not really been that hard of a category for me to find a lot of people in. I think there are people who I'd maybe even count as borderline strangers who, on sort of hearing that they're in some kind of distress or something like that, it seems like a decent thing to just give them the time and talk them through something or that. I think maybe in my case it's a little bit easier to give my time. It's not like I have a lot of time to give up, but it's one of these things where, I don't know, I think there's sometimes some value in terms of, helping someone who might be going through a tough time to feel marginally better in that moment. And in some cases, you can try and give financial help. I don't think people have really called on me on that. I think there's also just sort of there's probably a social barrier to that too. I think people largely don't want to do that. They don't want to put people into the position for that. And I think usually there's an expectation that maybe you're a little bit closer to someone if you were to do that at all. And of course, I'm not like poor, but I'm not in the position where I'd really be able to to change someone's circumstances through some kind of financial contribution. At the very least, not without sort of putting myself in jeopardy. So, you know, it could just be all that I'm babbling on this, but it's mostly just to kind of illustrate that, you know, for the most part, while time may be scarce, it is something that I can provide, and I'm hoping that it provides, you know, value above the, you know, the personal cost to me. And, you know, part of that is just, it's nice if you can live in a world where, you know, if you found yourself in a similar situation, don't mean to get like Rawlsian on this, but, you know, it would be nice to know that you sort of live in a place where if you find yourself in similar circumstances, you know, you might be able to sort of count on that kind of support from someone else, even if they were potentially a stranger. But of course, more importantly for me is that this is somebody who I actually do think quite highly of. And so it's a little weird to explain how, even though you don't have these really overt displays of caring for someone, you know, it's not like, you know, I've known them since middle school and we talked every weekend and, you know, they went through the most terrible thing that they could have in their life. You know, that's the easy case. But it's more, you know, this is someone who I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I've seen maybe two hands, you know, number of times I've seen them in person. It's always been a couple of years between contacts, but I'm always very happy to hear from them. And they seem to be basically a lot better put together than I am. You know, they actually seem to have their life figured out, or at the very least, they have things that they value enough to, you know, to know when things are going right and things are going wrong. But the reason why I mentioned this person was that I don't even know if they know that I stream, but the funny thing is, like, it's hard to explain, particularly to people who are not gamers, like what the value of streaming is or why people will want to watch it. You know, I hang out with some people, and sometimes that will be on streams, but I very rarely actually watch streams so much as just use them as an interaction with somebody who I may have some other kind of connection or tie with. But the funny thing is that, you know, I occasionally talk with them and I know that they have an interest in myth. In fact, I think I lent them my copy of Joseph Campbell way back in middle school, because, you know, I'm super cool like that. I was reading Joseph Campbell instead of, you know, having real friends. But yeah, so there was that, and then of course there's the, you know, just the chance to sort of talk with them during what sort of seemed to be a bit of a rough patch. I didn't really inquire too much in terms of what the particulars of the circumstances were. I had a bit of a guess, and then you know, they opened up a little bit more, and it was more or less what it kind of seemed like it would be. But yeah, you know, felt for them. I think I can sometimes sympathize for less of like the really big dramatic things, as painful as they can be sometimes. I also kind of sympathize with like the day-to-day grind stuff at work, because even though I am generally quite happy with where I am in terms of work, I don't think anybody is a stranger to work environments where they feel like they're not flourishing, or where they, you know, work environments where you're feeling underappreciated, or, you know, you don't necessarily feel like you're flourishing, and particularly ones which maybe pay you reasonably well. Hey, Jamie, good to see you. I was feeling a little bad that I didn't do the early warning on the stream. I apologize for that, but I'm glad you could come in. I did do a little bit of a rant at the start. And it's taken me 10 minutes to get to the point here, but the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about this was, the funniest thing was, especially after the sequence that we just got through from Wednesday's stream, I've really been thinking of how do I show Hellblade, and specifically Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, to this friend who probably isn't much of a gamer, probably doesn't know that there are these games that try to maybe punch above their weight, or maybe say something a bit stronger than just, good triumphs over evil. There's nothing wrong with that story, by the way. That can sometimes be a decent one as well. But something where I actually think, I don't necessarily know if this is the particular story they need to hear right now, but if I kind of get the sense that there are a few beats that this story hits that might help a little bit at the moment. And it also just happens to touch on a few of these kind of almost these mythopoeic touches that I think would appeal to them at this moment. And it's been a fun little experiment for me to sort of think about, if I can't take for granted that this person's going to be willing to sort of sit down and watch 7 hours of someone playing a video game to seemingly no end, like how do I distill this into something that will have the impact, or at the very least earn that 15 minutes more, so that they can get to the thing that might make them feel a little bit better during a bad time. And it's true, this is maybe a little bit of a secret, but every once in a while for people, I will do a private video. It's not like a paid thing or anything like that, but if somebody's having trouble with a video game, if somebody I happen to know is in a little bit of distress, and I know that they like my stuff, or they like a particular thing that I do, every once in a while I've done sort of a private video. And sometimes it'll just be like for a streamer friend, where it's like, I think you'll really like this game, but I also know you're going to need some convincing. And sometimes those have resulted in me testing something out for stream that wound up working really well. Sometimes it's just been, hey, here's something a little nice. Hope you like it. And some people, it's like, I have no idea. Like, so Total War, I had no idea how Total War worked. But then somebody really wanted to get into Total War Warhammer. And I'd finally started to feel a little more comfortable with it. So I gave them sort of an example of a battle to say, here's how you can make this feel a little bit more than just smashing army men together. And so yeah, it's and then in some cases it's just somebody's like a big fan of Warhammer 40k, but they have no idea about 4X strategy games. So to do a series of videos on like Gladius, just hopefully pushing someone over that hump to get them into something that they really enjoy. So it's something that I've done in the past, but it's a fun little exercise to try and see, for one individual to try and see what their tastes might be, and how do you communicate something that on the surface may not be their thing, but you can, to try and find that angle so that they can get the benefit of the payload, the either the fun of the game or the message or whatever it is. I feel like a hack streamer, so I don't know if I can say it makes me a better streamer, but I do think it's a good exercise to just try and understand what people might get out of a game, which informs sort of anybody who might want to create something. It's sort of about building that empathy to build that understanding with a player, right? You can think of something as a bunch of, C# scripts, or you can think of them as like game object. I'm talking pure Unity now, but basically you can think of things as a bunch of entities inside of a virtual environment, which is kind of necessary as a designer. But in the end, it's the combination of these factors that's creating something that, is the entertainment product people are willing to spend increasing amounts of money on, right? I think we're at the age where probably an $80 US game is going to be the standard for the high end. And then for somebody who wants to be a broadcaster, there can be some value in understanding what, what your audience takes away from it, particularly if you are looking for smaller or lesser known games, and to try and maybe be that bridge so that people who otherwise wouldn't have experienced that game instead have this opportunity to find something really special. Anyways, I figure I've given enough lead in for people who want to see Hellblade 2. On we go. And we will be taking breaks if the shaders are, or whatever the problem is. We'll be taking the breaks to go through. That's kind of you to say, Jamie.
I know you. Remember. Her rage holds her here, trapped in her hell. I need to free her from her prison.
I'm making a guess here that I don't want to be caught out into the fire, but... Oh. I particularly like...
Break her chains.
So I do particularly like how they've connected this back. Damn it! They've done a great job with the music cues too. Anyways, I'm... Ah! I really should have more direction in terms of where I'm going as well. I can't quite see the chains yet. But yeah, so... Ah! But what I wanted to say earlier, I like the idea of tying this back to the first game, and I'm dead. I just wish I knew where the other chain was. I'll make it, but yeah. Ah! So I think I just put a whole bunch of effort into getting back at this to the start of the level without without there being an actual goal there. All right, so it told me to break her chains, which I did. Hey, Tiberiosity. Yeah, now it's a rhythm game. We need Diluted Daybreak to come in, and yeah, I need to smarten up a little bit on this. It's just mostly I'm